"Please marry my daughter," my father-in-law implored. I was so taken aback by his words that my mind went blank. "Her, Mary, you mean me and your daughter Emily?" "Emily is my ex-wife's sister. She's probably just graduated from college. When I met Emily, she was still in middle or high school, and I remember fondly how much I adored her. The thought of me marrying Emily is just inconceivable. After all, regardless of who it is, I have no intention of falling in love or marrying again." "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Besides, I have no plans to marry again. I intend to live alone for the rest of my life," I said, showing my respect. Then my father-in-law made an even more surprising statement. "That's even better. Our interests aligned perfectly." "What? What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm John. 3 years ago, I lost my beloved wife, Laura. She passed away only 2 years after we got married. When my wife started feeling unwell, and we went to the hospital, she was suddenly given only a year to live. Laura endured painful treatments and fought bravely. She held on 18 days longer than her prognosis, but unfortunately, she passed away. At the time, both Laura and I were just 30 years old, and we naturally imagined a happy future with children and a loving family. But all that was lost, and I couldn't harbour any hope for the future without Laura. I couldn't imagine a happy life. That's why I thought, So, of course, I don't want children anymore, nor do I intend to engage in love or marriage. I live a modest life alone, hoping to reunite with Laura in the afterlife and finally live together. I've never been religious, but I find comfort in such thoughts." 3 years later, about a week after Laura's death anniversary, I hadn't seen my in-laws much since Laura's funeral and sorting out her belongings. But they contacted me after a long time. It's been 3 years since she passed. Without thinking deeply, I went to Laura's parents' house as an invitation. Laura's father is the CEO of a large corporation. Laura was the daughter of the CEO, and she worked at her father's company. I joined the company as a recent graduate and met Laura there. I'm not ambitious, so I never thought about promotions or climbing the corporate ladder. I was surprised to learn, after dating, that Laura was the CEO's daughter. Her father liked me and even talked about me being the next CEO. But after Laura passed away, I knew I wasn't the one to take over. So, I resigned from the company. It was a bit awkward meeting them again after all this time. However, what Laura's father said at their house was completely unexpected. "Please marry Emily." I was so surprised that I went blank. "Huh? Marry Emily? Me? Emily is Laura's sister. She must have just graduated from college or something. When Laura was alive, Emily was still in high school. And I remember how fondly I adored her. The thought of marrying Emily is just inconceivable. Regardless of who the other person is, I have no intention of falling in love or marrying again. Yet, the idea of marrying my late wife's sister is bizarre to anyone. Still, for my in-laws to make such a request, there must be a significant reason behind it. But I can't agree to it. I understand. There might be circumstances. But I'm sorry, I can't do it. I haven't thought about marrying anyone other than Laura. I plan to live alone for the rest of my life, I said, showing my respect. Then my father-in-law made another surprising statement. "That's even better. Our interests align perfectly." "What? What do you mean?" I was completely lost by the true meaning of his words, so I asked again. He then suggested, "Can I call Emily herself?" I was confused but agreed. When my father-in-law called for Emily, she quietly entered, probably from the next room. She sat down in the chair next to her father, across from me. I've seen Laura and Emily get along many times, but I can't say I'm close to Emily myself. We've only had a few one-on-one conversations, and I thought Emily would be in trouble if she asked me to marry her. I'm really sorry for this sudden request, but Emily insisted. I was shocked again when my father-in-law said that. What? Emily, did I become even more confused? Seeing my confusion, my father-in-law said, "You guys talk about this together," and left the room. There was a moment of silence, and then Emily said, "I'm really sorry for suddenly making such a rude request. I think the last time we met, she was still a student." I was relieved to see she hadn't changed much from her humble and polite demeanour back then, despite such an absurd request. "Well, yes." Unsure of how to respond, I replied hesitantly. And Emily began to explain the situation. "I have a fiancé, but he was someone my father chose for me." Aha! I thought such situations only existed in dramas. Being the daughter of a big company CEO must be tough. My father loved my bright, kind, and intelligent sister Laura, and he always said he wanted you to take over the company. Losing both of them, I think he's desperate for an heir. Laura and Emily had no brothers. I guess the company really is in trouble with the successor issue. That's why he wants to marry me off quickly and prepare the next heir. But I don't want to get married. Not ever. Emily's eyes showed a strong resolve, clearly indicating her aversion to marriage. It felt intrusive to ask why she didn't want to marry, so I asked what concerned me most. "Then why do you want to marry me?" She didn't seem to have any affection for me. Emily hesitated before looking me in the eye and saying, "I thought everything would be neatly resolved with you. It's selfish of me. I don't want to marry, but I have to for my father. But I don't want to be in a romantic relationship. Initially, I thought it impossible to find someone who felt the same about marriage and love. But then I remembered you said the same at my sister's funeral. That's why I'm making this selfish request. I'm sorry." I finally understood why I was being asked such an absurd thing. Of course, I don't intend to have a marital relationship or children. If you join my father's company, you could become the next CEO, and the compensation would be substantial. I'll try to meet any questions or demands you have, so please consider it, Emily said. Aside from the fact of becoming my sister-in-law's husband, there was no particular reason for me to refuse. I'm not passionate about my current job, so working for my father-in-law, who needs me, seems like a way to be useful to someone. I have no siblings and my parents have already passed away, so entering or leaving a family register wouldn't affect anyone. The most important fact is Emily's desperation to the point of proposing such an unusual solution. If my marriage can help resolve this situation, it might be worth considering. However, the problem is that she is Laura's sister. Even though there are circumstances, I wonder what Laura would think if she knew I married Emily and lived with her. Even if it's not a romantic relationship, it might not sit well with her. Of course, Laura has passed away and wouldn't know, but I still didn't want to do anything that might sadden her or make me unable to face her, even if it seemed minor. What should I do? My own feelings are strong, but Emily's desperate plea is also reaching me. That's why I couldn't respond immediately, creating an awkward silence. Then Emily stood up, with her eyes filled with tears. "I know it's not something I should ask of my sister's husband, but please, I'm begging you," Emily said, her voice trembling. At that moment, I suddenly remembered seeing a similar scene in the past. Back then, still in her school uniform and quite innocent, Emily would cry so much she couldn't speak, and Laura would embrace and comfort her. Several times, Emily's expression would change, and then, always with a smile, she would say, "Thank you, sis," and leave, Remembering this, I finally made up my mind. If Laura could see us now, I felt like she would say, "I'm fine, so please take care of Emily. I understand. I'll accept it," I said. Hearing my words, Emily expressed her gratitude many times. And so I ended up living a married life with my deceased wife's sister, Emily. But in reality, it was nothing like a marriage. We would eat separately, do our own laundry and dishes. We set up a rotation for cleaning common areas, and since we both worked, there was no financial interference. It was more like sharing a room with a stranger. So we made thorough rules. "Thank you for accepting my proposal on her first day at our house," Emily said. Polly, then she went straight to Laura's altar and prayed for a long time. This was the house Laura and I lived in. The thought of living with Emily, whom Laura adored, made me wonder what Laura would think. That day took so long to move in and organize Emily's belongings that before we knew it, it was night. "I'm going to the convenience store, since we don't have much. Do you want me to buy anything?" I asked Emily as she was organizing her room. Suddenly surprised by my question, Emily seemed to accidentally bump her arm into the shelf. "Are you okay?" When I asked in surprise, she said, "I'm fine, sorry." Could you please get pasta for me?" Emily replied. Such casual conversations had ceased completely since Laura passed away. It was a bittersweet feeling, missing Laura and feeling lonely with someone who wasn't her. I decided to eat in the living room. After returning from the convenience store, it was awkward as we had hardly ever talked one-on-one. But avoiding each other by eating in separate bedrooms felt too blatant and disrespectful. While absent-mindedly eating my ready meal, I noticed what looked like a bruise on Emily's arm. "Is that from when you hurt yourself earlier? Are you sure you don't need to ice it?" Upon hearing my words, Emily quickly covered her arm with her sleeve. I felt something was off, but didn't think much of it at the time. Was it insensitive of me to bring up the bruise on a woman? I thought, deciding not to mention it again. However, Emily's puzzling behaviour continued. When Emily tried to do the dishes after dinner, I suggested, "I'll take care of it. You can continue with your room." As I turned around to switch places, Emily quickly covered her neck and turned toward me abruptly. Her expression seemed panicked and angry, so I involuntarily said, "I'm sorry." I reflected on whether my sudden approach had startled her. I thought I had maintained a proper distance, but I'm the one who should apologize. "Thank you for the dishes," Emily said quickly, and then rushed to her room. By this point, I already had a vague sense of unease, and that turned into certainty just before going to bed. After finishing my bath, my bedroom is right before the bathroom, so I could have gone straight to bed. But I thought it would be rude not to say anything, so I headed to the living room where Emily was. Emily was praying at Laura's altar, and seeing her devotion made me feel a bit warmer. Thinking about the close bond between the sisters, as she finished praying, and I was about to tell her I was going to bed, I noticed a suspicious bruise on the back of her neck. From a distance, it looked like a mark left by something tightly wrapped around it. After observing her behaviour throughout the day, I had a gut feeling that I couldn't just leave it be and asked, "What happened to that bruise?" I knew she might not like it, but I asked anyway. Emily turned around, surprised, and then tried to evade the question. Emily struggled to find her words. Sensing she had a difficult situation to discuss, I patiently waited for her next words, which came sooner than expected. "I can't believe you agreed to marry me, listening to such a huge selfish request. I can keep secrets from you." Then Emily rolled up her sleeve to reveal her arm. I was shocked at what I saw. Her arm was covered in bruises of various shapes and ages. I was abused by the person I was dating, being hit, burnt. It was a daily occurrence, and I became used to it. I knew I had to leave, but I couldn't because I loved him. I grew to hate myself more and more for being so weak, Emily spoke painfully. And then I realized why she was so scared when I went behind her. It reminded her of her traumatic experiences, I thought. But I was dumbfounded when he dumped me so abruptly, saying he'd found someone else he liked. I endured so much pain just because I didn't want to be hated by him, yet to be let go so easily was a shock. More than anything, I was surprised by how sad I felt about the breakup, even though the days had been so tough, Emily continued. The range of negative emotions on her face was palpable: sadness, frustration, fear. It pained my heart to see her like this, so different from the smiling face she used to show Laura. Since then, I've tried to start new relationships for a friend's introduction, but I developed a fear of men. Even a slight touch from a man made me tremble with fear, and just talking to them would set my heart racing. I used to dream of a normal life, getting married, having kids, but now I realize those dreams might never come true. I learned the hard way that the scars of abuse are lifelong issues, something I wish I'd realized sooner. And then, as if oblivious to her condition, my father-in-law-to-be announced our engagement. The thought of marriage was impossible for her, with her fear of men. Indeed, in this situation, it would be unfair to the person she'd marry. Emily, desperate to avoid marriage, thought of me. Since I knew her from before and wouldn't demand a romantic relationship given her condition, plus it would please her father, that's how she came to the idea of marrying me. I'm so sorry for involving you in my selfishness. My sister might even be angry. What am I doing? Emily broke down, all her pent-up emotions collapsing. She cried endlessly, tears flowing one after the other, words unable to capture her pain. It was reminiscent of the times when Laura was there, but now there's no Laura to comfort and reassure her. But I'm still here, just like back then. I may not be able to replace Laura, but I can carry on her legacy. Laura would definitely not be angry. She always said she wanted to be on your side no matter what. I'm sure Laura still wishes for your happiness more than anyone else. It's true that Laura isn't here anymore, but her love for you hasn't disappeared. So, let's calm down and really think about what will make you happy, I said. Emily nodded through her tears as I spoke. Then, after she had calmed down, I made a confession. First of all, I hadn't registered our marriage yet. I showed her paperwork for the marriage, filled out and meant to be registered today. There was no rush, so I decided to bring it back home to make sure this was really what she wanted. Emily was surprised, but I now think it was for the best. The wounds in your heart are immeasurable. Healing them might not be easy, but as long as you still have the true desire to someday marry someone you love and have children, I want to honor that wish. I'll do anything to support you as your brother-in-law, I said. Perhaps her true feeling had been buried under fear, haste, and consideration for her parents, but Emily's true hope was indeed here. Jess, thank you so much, Emily said, tears welling up again. Thus, Emily and I managed to avoid getting married at the last minute and started living new days. Of course, we stopped living together. We explained the situation to her parents. They understood, and Emily began visiting a clinic for mental health care. Although legally my marital relationship with late Laura had ended, the familial ties still existed. So, with her father's wish, I officially took on the role as the heir, being the husband of Laura. My stance of not marrying anyone but Laura hasn't changed, but now I have caring in-laws and a sister-in-law. Even though we're not related by blood, this alone has made me feel that I'm not living a life alone. At first, I thought marrying my late wife's sister was an absurd suggestion, but it's thanks to that proposal that I have this life now. Looking back, I think that it must have meant something. That's how I feel about it now. If Laura were looking down on us, I bet she'd say the same thing.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.